Hello out there, and welcome back to the GamecockScoop.com podcast, the official podcast of GamecockScoop.com on Rivals. I'm Caleb, joined by Alan, and we have a lot to talk about today. This is the day after National Signing Day. Good bit of drama, both positive and negative, for the Gamecocks on that. Got to hear from Shane Beamer for the first time in what was it, like 40 days? No,
since post-game Clemson, so 25 days, 26 now, but
Fair
still
enough.
almost a month.
A while, yeah. So that's exciting. We'll fill in some gaps there. Some other stuff has gone on in the portal. Obviously, both basketball teams are still off to their hot start. It's a really fun time right now. So we'll see how that goes. For some reason, we use StreamYard or whatever to try to stream stuff as we're going. I was trying to get it set up on Instagram Live. It looks like it's not working right now, but maybe we'll have that in the future. Those of you that are watching, thanks for checking in on Twitter or YouTube, which is where I think the other two are posted right now. If you would like to see when we go live, make sure you subscribe on Twitter or YouTube at Rivals Gamecock. We're also on Instagram, Facebook, all the things.
We'll take your questions. If you're watching, we got some stuff we're going to get to, but if you have a question you want to ask, there's a comment box on YouTube and on Twitter if you respond to the tweet.
Yeah, exactly. And on top of that, sorry, I'm just getting this Instagram out of here. On top of that, we turn this into a podcast. So if you want to listen on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever it is that you listen to, that works as well. Anyway, let's start to break down this 2024 class a little bit. So at the moment, it is ranked number 29, I believe, in the 2024 Rivals rankings. But Rivals does kind of penalize smaller classes. So if you were to filter by average star ranking, then it's actually 13th in the country.
And even that's going to take a knock too, because you've got Mason Love in this class, the kicker, which Rivals doesn't rank kickers, but that's not a 2-star prospect.
Yeah, it's true. So to put it another way, of the 16 commitments, and let's call it 15 commitments, because Mason Love is definitely not a 2-star prospect. If you go to the kicking sort of rankings on other sites, he's considered a 5-star kicker, punter, whatever. So, but let's just get rid of him. Let's say there's 15 prospects. 10 of the 15 prospects are 4 stars or higher, which is a pretty great percentage there if you're South Carolina. We talked a lot throughout the season, especially over the summer when it felt like South Carolina was missing out on some close battles. I think back to like Jonathan Paylor or Malcolm Ziegler or something like that. We talked about how the NIL strategy seems to be go after your sure things, like Dylan Stewart or Josiah Thompson. Not that I'm saying that they got paid heavily or anything like that, but make sure that you land the plane there, and then go find your hidden gems like a Fred Johnson who had very few offers before South Carolina offered and is now one of the highest rated linebackers in the country. Like a David Bucky who the staff really likes, or Busey, the staff really likes, that's only rated a 3-star on Rivals. So between those two and then saving your NIL money for the portal, which it seems like they definitely did with the way that the last couple of weeks have gone, you can kind of start to build out a team from there. And so far, I would call the 2024 cycle, both from a high school recruiting perspective and a transfer perspective, a win. I mean, obviously, you're not going to win every single one. But I have to say, or I have to think you're feeling pretty good if you're Beamer and the staff about how everything's gone. We'll see how things go with Daniel Hill, who is still out there. He's going to commit during the All-American game on January 6th.
Yeah.
At the moment, I would probably pick Mississippi State if I had to pick where he's going. But as we've seen, that's kind of changed with the wind every 2 weeks or so for the last 6 months. So we'll see if anything changes again between now and January 6th. Let's break down this class a little bit. I thought a cool way to do it would be let's give kind of class superlatives. If you want to read this in written form, it'll be posted on GamecockScoop.com later tonight, or at least mine will. We kind of picked our own, but let's go with this. So, who is your biggest impact player from this 2024 class? I'm sure we probably both have the same name, but
I think it kind of has to be Dylan Stewart just by virtue of being a 5-star. Beamer said yesterday he's the highest rated player the program's ever signed outside the state of South Carolina. In the interest of giving a different answer, though, I'm going to say Josiah Thompson, who by most services is the second highest rated player in this class, the highest rated offensive player. It's an offensive lineman that has real week one starting potential at tackle. That's something else we didn't talk about yet, but Jalen Nichols went in the transfer portal yesterday. That's a guy who was your starting left tackle in 2022, who would have been last year if he hadn't gotten hurt in the spring game. I think this is something Beamer said yesterday too, but you literally can never have enough offensive linemen. I think if there's anything you learned about this team, the 2023 season, it's that. And we're going to talk about this whole offensive line class. That's 3 pretty big in-state blue chippers, but Josiah Thompson is a top 50 national player, and I think could play week 1.
Yeah, I think Josiah Thompson's a great answer there. He's going to come up in just a moment for one of my other ones. I did say Dylan Stewart. I took the easy way out there, but like you said, the highest rated member of this class and the highest rated out of state 5-star that South Carolina has ever landed in the modern Rivals era. I think he is a legit edge rusher that will make an impact as a freshman. But as much as I like Desmond Umeozulu and his upside, and think a year in the program means we're going to see some from him next year, he was not quite, I guess, ready from day one the way that Dylan Stewart's going to be. There's a reason that he's continually been a 5-star since pretty much the entire process for the 2024 class in Rivals. Every time someone's gone out to see him, they've continued to put praises on him. I heard Adam Gorney talking to Shane Beamer about that yesterday, and he pretty much said, like, that's what we need as edge rushers. We didn't do a good enough job at that last year, and Stewart kind of immediately steps in and makes an impact on that role. So that's my thing there. With Josiah Thompson, in that same interview, it was Adam Gorney, Rivals national analyst. He said, he keeps creeping up the rankings. He's basically a 5-star in Rivals now. He's not quite there. He's like the
4.9 star.
Yeah, he's about as close as you can get. I think he's like the 40.
It was 48, I think. Yeah, I wrote a story about the line yesterday if you were subscribed. But yeah, 48.
Yeah, so 48th ranked player in the country. He's the number 4 offensive lineman in the country. And when Gorney was talking to Beamer yesterday, he was like, I'm still not sure that we have him rated high enough. And like you said, there's some other services that do have him in that 5-star range. So by the time it's all said and done and we get the final rankings, it's possible that this class has 2 5-stars. Either way, it doesn't really matter how many stars are beside their name or not. They're both going to make a big impact and early. I expect both to play next year.
Yep, I'm with you there. I'm with you on Stewart. That's probably the correct answer. Just wanted to offer something different. Should we move on to underrated?
Yeah, so my most underrated member of this class is Matthew Fuller. That's a running back who really took a big step forward his senior year. I don't have his final stat line in front of me. It'll be in the article later.
It was pretty ludicrous. 5A ball in Georgia. He tore it up.
Yeah, and I remember at one point, like 4 games into the season, he had like 1,000 yards through 4 games. He was putting up 200-yard weeks every game to start the season. I think he had a 4 touchdown game somewhere in that stretch. He was dominant in 5A Georgia ball this year. I think has good size, obviously a position of need at running back. I think you have some confidence now, and we'll get into this when we talk portal. You have some confidence in the sort of veteran presence in your running back room. I think that's a great freshman piece to let build for a year or two and see where he ends up. He kind of reminds me of who was the guy that just played for the NFL, played for the Patriots for a second.
Kevin Harris.
Yeah, he's got Kevin Harris vibes where Kevin Harris was a 3-star, but had just like crazy strength and speed. and kind of put it all together after a couple years. It wouldn't surprise me if we see a similar thing with Matthew Fuller.
Yep, I'm going to go with Fred Johnson. You mentioned him a little bit as kind of in that gem category, the linebacker from Virginia, kind of under recruited early in his cycle. Got the offer from South Carolina. I think Beamer said yesterday he came to one of their camps, but it committed in June. Staff stayed on him. Beamer mentioned they went up for his high school state championship game at UVA last week. I don't know about immediate playing time. I think you actually feel okay about linebacker right now with Debo Williams, Bam Martin, Scott, Pup Howard, and Stone Blanton all back next year. I don't know where that's going to fit for a guy like Fred Johnson as a true freshman, but I think you like the upside there. I think you like what you saw. Beamer also mentioned yesterday with him and Wendell Gregory, who might fit into one of the other answers, but that they both have exterior linebacker potential, as in like pass rushing edge type, not just inside linebackers. Where that fits, what that means in a 3-3-5, I don't know. But I thought that was an interesting comment. Just grouping two guys together there is maybe not just being what their position card says they are.
Yeah, we're going to end up talking about both he and Gregory a little bit more for one of my other answers. But I will say pretty much every time I talk to Adam Friedman throughout this year, he covers the Mid-Atlantic region for Rivals.com. He was talking about Fred Johnson. He's really come on very strong after that camp offer, like you said. He really hadn't done a bunch of recruiting service camps like Rivals or 247 or any of those. So he was kind of under the radar, and South Carolina took advantage of the fact that he was under the radar, got in there early, and really never looked back. There was definitely a little bit of a push from Virginia there at the end, but ultimately didn't work out. I was trying to find this comment on the Insiders Forum on GamecockScoop.com because one of our subscribers lives in that area, I guess, and he said basically that the local news had highlights of Fred Johnson pretty much every single week, and that doesn't surprise me at all. Kids
that's another thing Beamer mentioned too yesterday. Just that comment made me think of it, but I think he said it was 8 players in this class that are playing in high school all-star games and 6 who played in state championship games last week. And Fred Johnson falls in both those categories.
Yeah. And there is something to be said for like culture building, finding kids that don't know how to lose yet.
Yeah.
Don't know what it's like to lose, you can build a winning mentality sometimes without even meaning to with some of that. But yeah, all-star games are going to be really interesting to watch. You got the Under Armour all-star game. I'll have the full list of each of those posted before that, and then you have the All-American game, and like you said, there's 8 total, I think, playing across those 2 games, and then Daniel Hill, who's still a target as well. What about your offensive MVP? So the person you view as the biggest offensive player of this class.
So I said Josiah Thompson for another answer, so I'll just change it up. I'm going to say Dante Reno, but actually not even as much for what he can be at quarterback, even though I do still think there's a lot of upside there. It sounds like and it makes sense if you just track the timeline, was the lead recruiter as a player in this entire class. Beamer said yesterday that if football doesn't work out for him, he's going to hire him on staff as a recruiter. Dante Reno has been committed since July of 2022. That was 6 months for anybody else in this class. He's been kind of driving the bus from a player perspective, getting players in, even down to signing day. Beamer said he called Dante Reno yesterday about just the Devin Gatling flip, which you might get to that later too. Your MVP of this class, Dante Reno, leading like a quarterback. I have a feeling you're going to say Josiah Thompson, but if you got another one, I'm curious to hear it.
Well, I have him for a different answer, so okay. I do have another one. But yeah, just on Dante, great kid. Probably the recruit I've talked to the most throughout this cycle too. I assume that's probably the case for anyone that covers recruiting in this space, because he seemed always kind of down for a quick interview, quick check-in, and was always a pleasure to talk to. If you go back to his commitment interview I did on our YouTube channel on Gamecock Scoop, we recorded this whole interview, and I looked down and realized that I hadn't hit the record button. And if I'm him as a 18-year-old, I'm like, good try. I'll see you later. Whatever. But he actually let me hit restart and we recorded the whole thing again. So I will never forget that memory, and I think that speaks a lot to his character as a young man as well. My impact player is actually another one that I think South Carolina did a good job of getting in on early before his recruitment blew up, and that is tight end Michael Smith. He is a supreme athlete. He's definitely going to fill that more Jaheim Bell, Trey Knox, who's the guy right now that's coming back this year?
Simon.
Yeah, more of your Josh Simon, more of your pass catching role. Whereas we've seen some other guys like Brady Hunt who can catch passes, but I think are also going to fill that hybrid role. Connor Cox, more of that hybrid role. So anyway, I think a big get and someone that's going to be an offensive weapon. Maybe as soon as next year, you could start to see him work in a little bit, but definitely as he builds out his big frame, he's a great athlete. So I think that's going to end up being a really good get.
This has kind of been a staple of really throughout the Shane Beamer era, maybe Gator Bowl aside. Like your tight end room right now is very diverse. It's very deep. You can go back to whether that's the 2022 season where you had a guy like Jaheim Bell in there, who you mentioned. Austin Stogner was there that year too. And then last year you kind of flipped that whole room, right? You got Nick Elksmith in, Simon, Knox, Cox, and Reed McKeska as your freshman. Now you're adding Smith as a freshman. You got Brady Hunt in the portal, as you said. A lot of bodies there and a lot of different options there at tight end, just kind of things you can do with that room.
What about on the other side of the ball? Who do you feel is the defensive MVP of this class?
Taking the Dylan Stewart out of it, just kind of that's the obvious caveat that's probably the answer. I'm going to say Jalewis Solomon. That was probably the most chaotic recruitment of this cycle for South Carolina, at least. That was a flip from Auburn, where it felt like he was a South Carolina lock, and then he went to Auburn, and then he flipped back to South Carolina. Beamer told a story yesterday in his presser that the day Solomon committed to Auburn, he got a text from him at 2 a.m. the next night saying, "Don't stop recruiting me." And Beamer was just kind of confused about what that even meant, but he didn't. The staff didn't. They ended up getting the flip. There was the whole thing yesterday where if you want to see us panic for about 10 minutes on the Insiders Forum, they tweeted his welcome home. They deleted it. They reposted it. As for him as a football player, though, as a corner, a 4-star out of Georgia, listed as an athlete, but he's going to start a corner. Beamer confirmed that yesterday. We've seen players in Torian Gray secondary come in immediately and make an impact. I think there's going to be snaps up for grabs there at that position next year with Marcellus Dial out of the picture now. I think there's a really good get there.
Yeah, he shows up on this list in a different place from me as well. And I think the fact that you not only got him in, but got him in to play on the defensive side of the ball, because for a while there, he definitely wanted to play wide receiver, is huge, because I do think his upside's a little bit higher on the defensive side of the ball. But honestly, it wouldn't surprise me, especially given the state of the wide receiver room right now, if he doesn't play a little bit on both sides. Like it wouldn't surprise me at all if he takes some offensive snaps here and there. He is that sort of athlete. I just wanted to read a little bit of what John Garcia Jr., Rivals national analyst, said about him just a couple weeks ago. He called him one of the top two-way talents in the country, and really like one of the top athletes in the entire class. Said class is loaded at wide receiver. So maybe he's not in the top 100 if he's just going to play on offense, but if he's playing defense, that's really where his floor is high and his ceiling is even higher. So Rivals has Solomon rated higher than any other service, I think, and it's really looking at that defensive potential. So if South Carolina gets him to play on the defensive side of the ball, I think that's not far off. My defensive MVP, I kind of cheated. I just put the LBs. I went back and forth on which one of them I was going to choose between Wendell Gregory and Fred Johnson. They kind of have two different stories. Wendell Gregory was a highly rated recruit that was sought after by pretty much everyone in the South early on. And then he signed, what was that, last February and locked things down.
One of the early ones
from there. Yeah. Really drama free for such a highly rated recruit. And then, like you said, Fred Johnson has come along a little bit later with the rankings, but now they're basically rated the same. They have very similar body types. They have very similar playing styles. So yeah, it was kind of hard for me to choose which one of them is going to be the defensive MVP, but I think they both are just really good football players, have a nose for the football, and I don't know, how much they play as freshmen because, like you said, that linebacker room is pretty good and young right now. But we've also seen a lot of injuries there, so who knows? We'll see how that plays out. But also, if you're going to this 3-3-5 look, or you're trying to work in this 3-3-5 look a little bit more, it wouldn't surprise me to see them work in as edge, or like Bam Martin Scott sort of role
Right.
pretty early on as well.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So that's another that's kind of a pipeline too. You're getting there. That's the same high school you pulled Case and Henry out of, that Metro Atlanta school.
Right. I guess along those same lines, who is your immediate contributor? So who do you feel like has the clearest path to playing time and has the potential to take advantage of it?
We're kind of running answers into each other right now. I still think it's Josiah Thompson, just given the tackle situation and his talent. I'm going to say Cam Pringle also, though, because we haven't talked about him yet, and I think there's a very similar story to be had there. Another member of this offensive line recruiting class, of another 4-star, another in-state kid. Another one that was pursued by pretty much everyone in the South. That you had a push from Clemson from that you had to hold off. Just one of the largest human beings I've ever seen in person. I remember walking past him in the tunnel at the spring game last year when he was still a junior in high school at that point. This was April of 23. Just huge. And that's to say nothing of the football ability and what he can do on the field and as a blocker and everything like that. But I still think you'd have Thompson rated higher just because he is rated higher. But you need tackles, and there's no reason Cam Pringle can't be one of those guys.
Yeah, we currently have him listed at 6'7", 328 pounds.
Yeah, it looks it. And it's all muscle, too.
Yeah, there is a little bit probably of distribution that'll change a little bit once he gets into a college weight program, but I think he can definitely carry 300 plus pounds. It's definitely not 50 pounds of fat or anything like that.
No.
For reference, Josiah Thompson 6'7", 286 is what we have him listed at. I think he'll creep up closer to 300 too, but he's starting from a little bit of a leaner base than Cam is. My immediate contributor is Josiah Thompson. You already mentioned him, but I think because of the need, because of just how polished he already is. As I said, the Rivals national guys really, really like him. Won't surprise me if things move up even further. Every time they've seen him, he's moved up a little bit. So I think, getting him on campus, getting him in the weight room, and because of just the lack of depth, I don't know that he's starting next year, but he's on the 2 deep for sure.
No question. I don't even think you can even debate that. Who's going to grow the most in this class? Who's the guy that's maybe not as rated now, but you think in 4 years you're going to look back and say that was a pretty good get?
Yeah, so like you said, we are getting into some overlap a little bit. This was where I had Jalewis Solomon, and it's mostly just because I think he did play both ways in high school. If he really focuses in on DB, and we've seen Torian Gray obviously is one of the best in the business at developing defensive backs. I really think his skill set is primed to really explode in a way that only a few people can really reach. So it won't surprise me at all. Again, he's playing an All-American game as well. It won't surprise me at all if a couple years from now we're talking about him as a NFL draft potential sort of guy. He's got that level of upside, and polishing that will go a long way, I think.
I'm going to stick with Torian Gray's room and go to a guy we haven't talked about yet, which is a little surprising because he was the highest rated defensive back / safety in the state of South Carolina. Kelvin Hunter is on campus. Only a 3-star by Rivals. I think that's some people maybe thought he should have been higher. We've seen Torian Gray, whether that's Nicky Manwari, whether that's taking DQ Smith from a quarterback into a safety and playing as a freshman, Judge Collier last year, Jalen Kilgore. I just generally trust Torian Gray's evaluation and development. I think anytime you keep a kid in state, that's a big deal too, like we've talked about and like Shane talked about yesterday. And again, I don't know where the snaps are coming from as a freshman. I think you feel pretty good about Nick and DQ at safety, but over the course of a 4-year development, Kelvin Hunter feels like he could slide in there.
Yeah, something interesting when you watch the tape of Kelvin Hunter is how much he played close to the line of scrimmage as well. I believe he had several sacks this past season as a senior as well, which is kind of interesting from a safety sort of guy, right? But yeah, I think he slots as a potential nickel, playing a little bit closer to the line, and he's definitely got a nose for the football. And I would say the same is true for David Busey, the other safety in this class. He loves to hit. He was a middle linebacker at his high school, so he'll have to transition a little bit to playing safety. But I think he has the speed to do so, and he's already got the mean streak in him, I guess, that you need to hit someone coming across the middle. What about this last category, which is who is your hidden gem, which I suppose is kind of similar to most underrated, but just another one, I guess, that maybe hasn't quite gotten the boost that some of the bigger names in this class have.
I think I'm just going to go with the last member of this class, the one that signed a little over 24 hours ago, is Deborah Gatling, the wide receiver out of Georgia, the 3-star who flipped from Texas A&M. Another guy who was a state champion in his school. Actually, they beat Wendell Gregory's school in the state title game. That's a guy that not a lot of people know about, that I think even a lot of South Carolina fans don't know about, just how late that was in the process. Beamer said yesterday they ID'd him in the spring. They liked him. They stayed on him through the summer and into the fall. Obviously, the coaching change at A&M probably helped you out there a little bit. You were able to get in there and make that late flip.
Yeah, that's the same name I had there. When you look at the two wide receivers in this class, they have different but complementary styles. Mazeo Bennett obviously is a little more polished as a route runner. He's going to be more of your Kenny McKinley or Bruce Ellington type, where he's not the biggest bodied guy, but he runs really nice routes and he finds ways to get open. And he just has like a killer mindset. So I think he's going to do great. Maybe not as a true freshman, whatever. But Gatling's a little bit more of a one-on-one. Like he's really good at winning one-on-one battles. His tape is just full of him winning jump balls against DBs down in Georgia, like you said. His recruitment was a little weird. So he started pretty highly rated as a 4-star, like you said, ended up at Texas A&M, had offers from pretty much everywhere in the country. It's kind of gone down a little bit since then. He's ends up as a 3-star, but I think maybe they dropped him a little bit too far. He's somewhere between the two. I would put him probably as like a low 4 with the potential to be more. And that's really just, can he find a way to separate? Because he's really good at winning those one-on-one battles, which again, in college, you don't necessarily have to separate if you're good at that. Maybe that will limit his NFL potential or whatever. But I really think he could develop into someone that you can depend on, especially in like the red zone situations like that.
So, and I've been checking them off. There is exactly one high school commit in this class we have not talked about, and that is certainly not a last but least thing, because I wrote about him yesterday. Talk to me about Blake Franks, just because we have not mentioned him at all yet.
Yeah, I mean, I actually saw. I'll give credit to Hel McGranahan on the Big Spur because I saw him break down the class or whatever, and he mentioned that last year Trovon Baugh was the lowest rated offensive lineman in that class, and obviously probably had the best season of any offensive lineman. I mean, him or Tree. So you could see something similar, I think, with Blake Franks. He's certainly someone that they like a lot, that they believe can have an impact and have an impact early. You might say guard's a little bit deeper for South Carolina right now as far as the roster construction, so it might be harder for him to break through early, but I think in a couple of years it wouldn't surprise me at all if he's a starting member of that offensive line.
Yeah, I think just if nothing else, like you said, with Trovon Baugh, you feel good about at least one good spot at guard. But Franks is definitely worth mentioning. Like I said, I wrote about him a little bit more in depth on GamecockScoop.com yesterday, if you're subscribed. And that is your trio, right? Pringle, Thompson, Franks, your Great Wall of Carolina, as they've called it. 3 blue chippers, 3 offensive linemen, all in state. You got them all to stay. That's a huge deal, no pun intended.
Yeah, and I guess we didn't really talk a ton about Mason Love, but like I said, very highly rated kicking prospect. You don't usually give scholarship offers to kickers unless you feel pretty confident in it. I tend to trust Pete Limbo's talent eval.
Oh, that is another thing we didn't mention. Beamer said yesterday they'd move Alex Herrera on the scholarship after Mitch Jeter transferred to Notre Dame. And Herrera only has one more year of eligibility, so that's not going to be a long-term block on Love or anything. But that happened yesterday too, or we learned about it yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, I think ideally you'd like Herrera to be the guy this year, let Love develop for a year, and then be the guy going forward. But I mean, like you said the other day, it's not like you really need to bulk up as a kicker. If you can make the kicks, you can make the kicks. So that'll be an interesting storyline to watch in the spring and into the fall. I guess a good transition point here is you also picked up a JUCO defensive tackle in this class, Jerome Simmons. I don't know that he's someone that's going to come in and immediately fall in the 2 deep, and that's more to say just how much depth you have at defensive tackle now at this point after holding on to everyone and what you've already done in the portal. But I do think quality add that has some upside after being in the program for a year or so. So that'll be really interesting to see how that plays out. Also, there was a lot of portal news
since we last spoke.
Actually, one more thing about National Signing Day, in case you missed it, Braden Lee had a last-second flip to Maryland. There's already been a lot of discussion on the internet and across the internet about what went on there. You can read it straight from his mouth on the front page of GamecockScoop.com. One of our national analysts had an interview with him, but basically he said, his father died in the last year. There was a member of the Maryland staff, the name escapes me right now, that also lost a father pretty young or whatever. And he felt like they were able to build a relationship in that grief, I guess. It's hard to fault a kid for wanting to stay close to home with something like that happening. So I know South Carolina fans in particular don't like losing recruiting battles to Maryland after some things that went down a few years ago with Jayshon Barnum. If it makes South Carolina fans feel any better, Barnum signed yesterday with Michigan in the portal. So that didn't exactly work out for Loxley and company. But anyway, I guess all that is to say recruiting's weird.
Don't tweet at recruits. Don't yell at kids. Obligatory.
Yeah, exactly. Don't tweet at recruits. And yeah, I mean, sometimes what's best for the person matters more than what's best for college football programs. So that's all I really got to say about that one. All right, let's get into all of the crazy portal news that has happened.
We did hit a good chunk of it last week, but there has been several more since we last spoke. It's been a busy 7 days.
Yeah. I guess if I'm just going to rattle them off the top of my head, my most exciting thing to talk about is defensive end Kyle Kennard out of Georgia Tech. I think that is huge. He led Georgia Tech in sacks and tackles for loss last year. Pretty much exactly what you need at a position that you really need some quality depth at. I heard, I don't know if Beamer talked about it in the press conference yesterday, but he did talk about it with Gorney, and he talked about bringing in Dylan Stewart, but also just having another year in the program with guys like Umeozulu, with guys like Jatius Gear, who people don't remember, but he was a redshirt freshman coming in. And then you add a guy like Kennard, and I think that defensive line is starting to really come together and has a good bit of upside depending on how this offseason goes as far as development and all that.
We talked about Kennard a little bit last week because he was rumored to be with South Carolina. I don't know if that was the day of his visit here or like the day before when we recorded last week, but that's a big get. That's a Power 5 guy. That's a Power 5 starter on a team that went to a bowl game. That's a guy who can play 40, 50, 60 snaps a game for you at edge, get after the quarterback, medium pressure. Like you said, a guy for some of those younger guys to learn off of, take pressure off some of those younger guys. You don't need Dylan Stewart to come in and beat Jadeveon Clowney if you got a guy with Power 5 experience rushing the quarterback. And he held off Florida State. That's the other thing. He was in Tallahassee, I think 2 days before he was in Columbia, and he still won that battle.
Yeah, that was a huge priority for the staff, and they made it happen. And that's what you have to do. So when I look at other portal ads, you have
We talked about Brady Hunt a little bit. That's the tight end from Ball State. There were some Pete Lembo connections there from his time in Muncie. Sounds like he already kind of knew the family a little bit.
Yeah,
Good get.
That's a guy with a lot. Sorry, go ahead.
No, it's just good get. Ask the We talked about him in the tight end part of the earlier, but
yeah, definitely a guy with a lot of upside. He had ankle surgery last season, but in 2022 he was first team All MAC. Had 498 receiving yards and 5 touchdowns, and just a sophomore. So he did that as a freshman. Still has some room to grow. Still has some upside, and has already shown it on a college field, albeit at a little bit smaller level, lower level. You also finished out your running back room with SC State running back Jawarn Howell. That's another young guy. I believe he is coming off of his freshman season or redshirt freshman season, and was really productive for SC State. Again, up a level. We'll see how it produces. But I mean, having that as your third, fourth running back on your roster, I think is a nice place to be, especially compared to the last couple of years.
You've pretty much flipped your running back room, and not only that, you've spaced it out well with the scholarships and different, eligibility left. You're thinking, all right, maybe Rocket for one more year. I believe Oscar Adaway has 2 years of eligibility left with North Texas transfer. Obviously, you just mentioned Howell's an underclassman. You've got Juju McDowell, who's going to be a senior this year. And then DJ Braswell, who's a sophomore, and Matthew Fuller, who's a true freshman. You've got depth there, and you've got spaced out depth at running back, which neither of those things were true at this time last year.
Yeah, and I just double checked. It was his true freshman season this past year, and he's explosive. He had a 85-yard run. He averaged 7.9 a carry, 102 attempts, 809 yards, 7 touchdowns. Obviously, yeah, there's going to be a learning curve going from South Carolina State to the SEC, but he proved that at least at that level, he was one of the best athletes on the entire field and the entire conference.
Yeah, and you saw it last year that you can take that time. You can develop a guy from a lower level. You saw it with Mario Anderson coming from an even lower level. Who was from D2.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like I'm missing someone else in the portal. Gerald
Kilgore. Yep.
Yeah. That is obviously Jelon Kilgore's brother, Tennessee Tech. Yep. Nice step piece for the secondary. I honestly haven't had a ton of time to break down his game yet, but if he has any similarity to his brother, he should be just fine.
Yeah, pretty much what Beamer said yesterday, that he kind of got to know Gerald just because that's how it works when you recruited player. You get to know their whole family. He's kept an eye on them for a while. Gerald's I guess, is he younger? Or I think he's older, but
yeah, a year older.
So you just got to know him a little bit. He was already obviously in college then when Jalen was a senior. And they just, respects the family. It's, it works. Like, it works. It's good for Jalen. It's good for Gerald. It's good for everybody involved. It's another piece, like you said. Is that all the portals? I think we talked Rocket and Oscar last week.
Sort of. Let's get into the weirdness here for a second. So there are 2 other welcome homes that have not officially sent in their paperwork. One we know is not going to, and one probably is not going to. So the one that is out in the public sphere, wide receiver Jaden McGowan. We talked a little bit about him last week. Originally from Lawrence, played at Vandy, gave the staff a thumbs up, and so Beamer and company went with the welcome home. And then he even revealed that he was committed, and we ran the story. All the things seemed like he was in the coop, but what I've gathered is he continued to talk with Boston College and continued to try to get a better deal, try to leverage, use negotiation, whatever. I don't think that South Carolina liked that very much, which I can't say that I blame them. I don't think that they upped the offer, which I can't say that I blame them. And yeah, it sounds like maybe he's going to end up at Boston College now. I don't think that's a huge loss one way or another. I mean, certainly was going to be a part of the repertoire, but he kind of, projected to me as like an Omarion Brown, which is, again, important, speedy, could have, built in a couple of deep shots to him a game or whatever you're going to do. But there's going to be more movement in the portal after the bowl games and into the spring. I think you can still find one or two other wide receivers to replace that guy if it doesn't end up fully working out.
Yeah, we talked about him extensively last week, if you want to go back and look at that. But you did get Jared Brown in this class, too. He officially signed yesterday. That's the Coastal Carolina wide receiver who I think has more upside than McGowan.
Yeah, so we'll keep you posted on the Insiders Forum at GamecockScoop.com if anything else develops there one way or the other. But I'm, at the moment, not expecting things to work out there. And then the other one was a welcome home that we found out was AJ Swann. Again, we talked a little bit about him last week. South Carolina is looking for a backup quarterback or someone to kind of push Sellers or whatever, but they're not looking to. They like who they like in Sellers, or they like who they have in Sellers and Reno, who we talked about. They don't think it's a priority to go out and spend big money on a starting quarterback because they think they already have that in house. But they are looking for a little bit of depth because the room itself is sort of thin at the moment. I guess they thought AJ Swann could be that guy. It looked like AJ Swann wanted something more concrete in terms of being named the starter. I don't think he got that at LSU either, but he ended up at LSU, though they have an heir apparent there as well. So interesting, but whatever. So that other welcome home was AJ Swann, and he's not coming.
I will say, I do think if you just start looking ahead, that is still going to have to be a priority. Beamer said yesterday that Luke Doty was going to be, I think the term he used is continuing on his path, which means mostly wide receiver and special teams, and they'll just kind of dipping into the quarterback room. So if you look at it that way, you're basically down to two full-time quarterbacks, and one of them's a true freshman. The other one's Lenora Sellers, who's barely played. Like, it's very tricky to toe the line of needing someone and not wanting to feel like you're stepping over Sellers and wanting to create competition, but like you don't have enough bodies at quarterback right now. You just don't.
Right. And we've gotten several questions about KJ Jefferson.
Malachi Nelson's come up a little bit.
Yeah, Malachi Nelson, who I guess had South Carolina in his initial group of interests. Both those guys are going to be expensive, and I don't know if either of those guys wants to go and compete against Lenora Sellers. Like, it would be hard for me to foresee someone going and getting KJ Jefferson and not handing him the keys, especially he's only got one season left, right? So,
yep.
I do think there would be something to be said of going and getting Jefferson if Sellers was cool with learning behind him for one more year, because I think their games have some overlap. Could be a useful mentorship, but I mean, whatever. He had Rattler last year too, that I assume was also a useful mentorship. I think if you believe in him, your NIL resources are best used, kind of distributed around, and that's what we've seen. So I'd be surprised if either of those guys ends up at South Carolina, I guess, is the long way of saying that.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think that, like I've said, quarterback for sure. You'll never say no to more line depth on either side of the ball. And I don't know, probably wide receiver, now that McGowan's out of the fold, is probably what you got to look at target-wise moving forward in the portal and through, I guess there's still another signing day, even though it doesn't really matter as much in the modern era.
Yeah, you still need one or two veteran wide receivers, I think. You got some guys that are coming back, another year of development under Coach Stepp. They're going to be better, but I still think you could use some guys that have already proven it a little bit. And then, yeah, the freshmen, maybe they exceed expectations and put in some meaningful minutes as true freshmen, but that's a tough ask. So I think you definitely need some receivers. You'd like one more offensive lineman. You'd like a backup quarterback if you can. I've seen several posters on the Insiders Forum be like, why don't we go get a D2 guy? Do those guys want to come sit?
Yeah, that's kind of the program. Like,
when they could, at least play another year as a starter or whatever. I don't know. It's a tough call, but we'll see. Yeah, that's really it. And I do think Luke Doty can be a press button in case of emergency option.
Yeah,
and I don't know that he's a worse option than AJ Swann or whatever. So
either way, you're still down to 3 bodies in the quarterback room when you had 5 last year. And I'm not saying you're going to get to a 2021 Zeb Nolan situation, but it never hurts to have a fourth guy in there.
Yeah. Well, you already have a 2026 quarterback in Landon Duckworth.
Yeah.
And they are definitely still in it with 2025 quarterback Ryan Montgomery. So I think, as long as you can get through 1 year without any major injuries, things could start to build themselves back up. But I mean, that's the tough catch-22 of quarterback recruiting, right? You recruit quarterbacks that want to play, and in the portal era, there are places for them to go play if they are going to be stuck sitting for 2 or 3 years. So
yeah,
be happy that you have your starter. I think most teams would struggle if their starting quarterback went down. You're not in a unique position.
Yeah. That's just the reality of the one position on the field, I guess, other than like kicker and punter, where you only have one of them. There's 5 linemen, there's 4 defensive linemen in most systems, 2, 3 corners, 2, 3 receivers running. Like, there's one quarterback.
Yeah, exactly. One other portal note, I guess on the negative side, we got word yesterday that Jalen Nichols entered the transfer portal. That wasn't one that I had heard much rumblings of or whatever. As far as I know, he kind of was eyeing it last year, but it's kind of interesting that then you have a year where you don't play at all and then you go, because I can't imagine his profile has been elevated in that time or whatever. And it did seem like he would have probably started, but at the very least been on the 2 deep going into next year. So I don't know, a little bit of a head scratcher, but I don't know him or people around him, so I don't have a ton of insight on what went down there, except for he's in the portal and you're short one more offensive lineman, but you didn't have him at all last year anyway. So
yeah, I think that's just kind of where it comes down to. We talked about all 3 of those linemen in the recruiting class already. You could probably do with a portal lineman. You're not going to get the Texas Tech kid Monroe Mills. He committed to Louisville. He was on campus last week. And you still have an offer out for a Furman lineman. I think one other one too, but could probably do with one more body there, especially now that Nichols is gone.
Yeah, I believe they had another one for like an Ivy League guy. I don't know how that's turned out yet. I haven't heard a ton of momentum yet as far as visits with an offensive lineman besides the Texas Tech guy that you said already committed somewhere else. All right, any other recruiting or portal notes? I know that was a lot. It was a fun show. And if you didn't catch any of it or want to go back and read long form of any of it, go to GamecockScoop.com. If you go to the Insiders Forum, we had our early signing day thread going yesterday, and it had commitment articles for every single kid and had film breakdowns for every single kid in the 24 class, except for DeBron Gatling, who just committed yesterday, but we'll have some film stuff up later this week on him. So tons of content there if you want to know more about any of these recruits. And then we have our 2 portal threads going too, which have been kind of auto-populating since the portal opened at the beginning of this month, and tons of info there if you want to catch up on any of that. So that's the Insiders Forum at GamecockScoop.com. Let's talk a little bit of basketball before we get out of here. Over the weekend, I guess it was Tuesday, not the weekend.
No, they play over the weekend too. Both teams played twice since we last talked, and both teams have won twice.
Man, I am getting the holidays are a black hole.
It's December 21st. No one knows what day it is. No one knows what time it is.
Yeah, I'm completely lost. All right, so let's start with the women. Was the Utah game the last thing that happened? Or
no, they played Presbyterian Saturday and Bowling Green Tuesday.
Yes, and yeah, they won both by a million. So there's not a ton to discuss there. Except for that the turnovers continue to be a problem. Even in the Bowling Green game, they hit their average, which is about 12 a game. Chloe Kitts had a career high. That was pretty cool for her. Bree Hall made a million threes. They kind of dominated early on there. South Carolina started 10 of 10 from the floor, which is pretty good, I've heard. And there was never really any threat, I guess, from Bowling Green. Bowling Green's not a bad team. They're now 6-3, but they're one of the top teams in the MEAC. They may be a tournament team. there's a huge gap between
Yeah.
the two programs, and I mean, I guess that's all there really is to say about that. I don't know if you have any more to add on the women's side.
I didn't watch the Bowling Green game. That was the men's game. Presbyterian game, very similar thing. Played a decent overmatched Big South team and won. The women are on their Christmas break now. They will be back next week at East Carolina. That's their last game before SEC play. Just keep an eye on the turnovers. We talked about that a little bit last week. Is kind of my thing right now. The men have one more game before the Christmas break. They play tomorrow against Elon at home, and then they play Florida A&M on the other side of the break, and that is their last game before SEC play. They've played twice since we last talked. They won twice, both kind of ugly games. Beat Charleston Southern by 4, beat Winthrop by 10. You won both. I thought the Winthrop game was a little bit better than the score suggested. I thought they played pretty well for most of the night in that game. Winthrop hit a couple shots. Sloppy Sunday against a not very good team, but you found a way. Are we learning anything new about this team, or is it just we know they're better? We think they're decent. We're just gonna have to wait for conference play now, because I think I'm in that kind of holding pattern for a couple more weeks.
I think that's true, but I think it is good that you're getting out of here with wins. They don't.
No, for sure.
They're not going to give you a margin of victory, extra boost or whatever right now. Just get through non-conference play with one or two losses. Then you've really opened up a lot of doors for your flexibility within conference play. So I think Michi Johnson, after the game against Winthrop, tweeted like, no matter what anyone tells you, winning a college basketball game is not easy.
It's true.
I'm paraphrasing. It wasn't exactly that, but it was basically that. And that's kind of my takeaway from the like, maybe you've hit a little bit of a lull. Maybe some teams have started to figure you out a little bit after seeing you on film so much. Maybe you still have some weaknesses, but if you keep winning, we think they can probably compete against most average teams in the SEC, maybe not the upper echelon part. Your goal after this, if you can escape non-con with one or two losses, is get to 500 in the SEC, and you're a bubble team.
Yeah, no arguments here. I think kind of the main thing right now too, as something else that I didn't realize till someone said it, and I looked back and they were right, is you're going to play Elon tomorrow. If you win that game, which you definitely should at home against Elon, you're going to match last year's entire win total before Christmas.
Wow.
Before SEC play, you're at 10 now. You won 11 last year. I think that kind of says it all. No one's asking the team to win the national title. No one's asking the team to make the Final Four. But again, I'm going to say it again because it's worth repeating. You're going to match last year's whole win total next time you win a game, which really should be tomorrow, which I'll have live coverage of at CLA.
I mean, let's be honest about like some of our group chats and stuff. I guess before the season started, we were like, you make the NIT, you kind of feel like you've made some progress, I think you're solidly on that path, and there's even room for you to exceed those expectations at this point.
Yeah, we can talk about the math when it gets a little bit closer, when football stuff dies down a little more. I definitely think like if you clean up these last two non-cons, Elon, Florida A&M, that's tomorrow, and then the Saturday after that. 9-9 in the league probably gets you in. 8-10, you'd be on a bubble. 7-11, you're probably trending more towards the NIT. But 8 SEC wins is a target. Like, that's fair. That's reasonable. You're gonna have to stay healthy. You're gonna have to steal a couple of games along the line. But the fact that we're having that conversation, I think, kind of sums up where this team is.
Yeah, I mean, unless you like really, 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 really fell apart in SEC play, I think at the very least you feel comfortable with the trajectory of where things are heading under Lamont Paris. Obviously, there's still some work to be done recruiting, but he's kind of proven over the last two seasons, and particularly this offseason, that he can find guys that fit his system in the portal and make it work together cohesively. So,
pretty good time on the hardwood. Keep an eye on Gamecock Scoop for all the coverage. Like I said, I'll be there tomorrow night. That's the last game for either team before the break. And everybody, that's about all I had sports-wise. Enjoy your holidays, Christmases, your New Year's. Appreciate everybody following along this year. I don't know if we're going to record again before the new year, maybe. But if not, we appreciate all you guys. Subscribe, listening, watching, commenting, reading, all that good stuff.
Yeah, and we will definitely have content going every day throughout the new year on GamecockScoop.com. So definitely go check that out. Going to be breaking down the class even more start. I mean, it's always football season, right? And finishing up some basketball talk. There we go. I was unable to end the stream there for a second. All right, this has been the GamecockScoop.com podcast. We'll see you later.